and deeply tragic at the same time. To follow on from that and to set the scene for the panel on rebuilding Ukraine, please welcome to the stage Karl Nehammer, who is Vice President of the European Investment Bank.
Thank you very much, Oleksandr. To speak after you is nearly impossible, so thank you for your great words. Round of applause again, please. Ladies and gentlemen, dear ministers, dear leaders and policy makers, dear colleagues, it's an honor to open this discussion on rebuilding Ukraine's critical infrastructure. Just days ago, we marked another solemn anniversary. During 4 years of full-scale war, Ukraine and its people have resisted Russian aggression with extraordinary resilience and courage. They defend not only their homeland, but the values of the entire European continent. The European Union stands with them, and to be clear, we stand with them, we stand with you. For the European Union, support to Ukraine is not symbolic. It is a strategic choice. In cooperation with the European Commission, the European Investment Bank has turned that choice into action. We have already mobilized significant resources for Ukraine. Since the start of the war, we have provided over €4 billion to energy, infrastructure, small businesses, and EU integration. 2025 has marked a record year of 1.5 billion support in new financing. In 2025, one of our main priorities was energy. Together with our partners, we helped secure the necessary gas reserves through support to Naftogaz of Ukraine. In January, the bank provided an additional support to Naftogaz on top of earlier EIB and EU financing. We have also assisted in restoring strategic hydroelectric plants and provided financing through partner banks to municipalities. Thanks to our recovery programs, EIB is actively investing in critical infrastructure. Today, we have around 500 municipal projects across the country, including Frontline regions. Our effort is to make sure hospitals can function, schools can open, and families can heat their homes in winter. Beyond infrastructure, we are strengthening EU-Ukraine business links. Our export credit guarantee facility, launched in 2025, supports EU companies exporting to Ukraine, helping revive trade and support recovery. We are now preparing a broader package of guarantees, loans, and grants. However, it's equally clear that sustainable recovery will depend on private sector-driven growth. Over time, Ukraine must shift from predominantly public financing to attracting significant private investment. The EIB Group can mobilize this investment through its mandate and experience in crowding in capital. Finally, reconstruction must follow a Build Back Better approach. The EIB Group supports full alignment with EU requirements in procurement, governance, and sustainability. Together with the European Commission and member states, we have deployed 3 major advisory programs with strong track record in helping countries prepare for EU membership and develop robust investment pipelines. Together with our colleagues of EBRD, we share a common belief that investment in Ukraine is not only about recovery. It is about building a competitive, secure, and future-ready economy. Let us this opportunity to identify practical pathways to mobilize capital and scale impact. I'm looking forward to today's discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Karl. And now welcome to the scene, please, Jana Kobzova, European Council on Foreign Relations, who's going to lead the panel discussion. And joining her on stage, we have Olha Zykova, Deputy Minister of Finance from Ukraine, Ivan Fedorov, Governor of Zaporizhzhia, Greg Guyett, First Vice President EBRD, Gert Jan Koopman, Director General for Neighbourhood and Enlargement Negotiations at the European Commission, Olha Zykova, First Deputy Minister for Development of Communities and Territories of Ukraine, and Taras Pertsovskyi, Chief Financial Officer at Naftogaz Group.
Don't worry, I'm not going to speak for too long. I'm going to moderate the panel. But I'll just want to say a few words. I think it's especially humbling to be speaking after Oleksandr Matvichuk. I think, Oleksandr, we met first in 2013 when you were providing legal assistance to victims of the police violence on Euromaidan. And I think you're an example of this quiet, calm, and very dignified strength that many of us have come to know in Ukraine and recognize in so many people. And I think that's the force that doesn't need to be loud or shout to be heard and to be powerful. And that's the force that Putin mistook for weakness. And the result of that is that his 3 days long military operation is lasting for more than 4 years. Now, of course, those 4 years have brought enormous amount of pain, and you spoke about it in a way that I think will resonate with most of us for the rest of today and going onward. This has also been the harshest winter since Russia has started the full-scale invasion. And I want to leave you with some numbers so you appreciate the scale when we're going to be talking about rebuilding Ukraine. In 3 months of this winter alone, Russia dropped more than 14,000 guided aerial bombs on Ukraine, more than 730 different missiles of various types, and more than 19,000 attack drones. Just for context and comparison, earlier this week, 2 drones fired by Iran at one of Qatar's LNG facilities has knocked that facility off. Ukraine is sustaining the drone attacks on a daily basis. And the damage is horrendous, especially in human lives. There was a 12% increase in civilian casualties last year. It has been the deadliest year for civilians during the full-scale invasion since 2022. And there is also a huge damage on economy and energy. As of January 2026, Ukraine's generation capacity was half of what it used to be before the full-scale invasion, not to mention the repercussions for country's economic growth. This has been, just to make it very clear, a deliberate campaign. In other words, this is not a bug, this is a feature of the full-scale invasion that Russia is waging against the country. What does all of that mean for Ukraine's recovery? What does it mean for its future, including for its future in the European Union, which it is set on the path? What's the damage, and how can various international partners help and assist to prevent both the next deep freeze? You spoke very vividly about the situation in Kyiv this winter. How do we make sure that that doesn't repeat next winter? And of course, the first answer is, of course, military support and deep strikes. But we have a panel that's going to discuss all the other issues apart from military. I'm glad I don't need to answer these questions. I'm here to ask, and I have a panel that's going to help me answer them. I will start with you, Ivan Fedorov. You are the governor of Zaporizhzhia region. And previously, you were the mayor of Melitopol, which is now occupied by Russia. Zaporizhzhia is a region that is also partly occupied by Russia, and the city of Zaporizhzhia is, of course, under sustained attacks by the Russian Federation. Could you talk a bit more about what are the needs from the frontline areas, such as yours, and where do you see the international partners could help?
Thank you. First of all, thank you for to be today here and to inviting me. I represent near 1 million of citizens which now stay very close to Frontline. The Zaporizhzhia region located 20 kilometers to Frontline, and 1 million citizens have their everyday life, of course, with many of Russians' attack. For example, last 6 months, Russian attacked the Zaporizhzhia region not less than 700 times per day. And of course, it is hard to understand here in Luxembourg, where we can't understand it, but of course, more easy to understand if you welcome to Zaporizhzhia. I think that for last several days, you have very greatest numbers of information. That's why I want to stop only on a few numbers and a few very important accents. First of all, now Ukraine passed the most difficult winter last tens of years. First of all, a very low temperature outside. And second, very high activity of Russian drones and rockets on Ukrainian territory. My region 4 times was on a blackout. What does it mean, blackout? Blackout, it means that when on hospital we can't give any support for our patients because the electricity, there is no on our networks. It means that our public transport can't work because there is no electricity on our lines. It means that our water supply company can't work and deliver water to our flats and houses because there is no electricity on our lines. And the same with the heating season. It is hard to imagine, but I think it is easy to organize in all countries if we not stop Russian in Ukraine. And of course, we need to make our home task lessons learned for our next winter and what we need to do to be better prepared for more and more Russians attack. It is very important for us. That's why we need to build shelters on our transformator stations. It means that we need to build a reserve generation for all our critical infrastructure. And of course, it is one of the important duty, not only of Ukraine representatives and government, but of course about our international partner. Second, our challenge, which we have now, as I said earlier, the population of the Zaporizhzhia region now near 1 million citizens, but what is very important, near 200,000 citizens, it's IDPs who live their houses and homes on temporarily occupied territories. And it is our duty, it is our task to give to these guys new places for life and new places for new development. And of course, it is not only a task for Ukrainian government, it is a task for all of us and for all our international partners. And last but not least, but very important, it is like a patient who needs help of doctors. If we give this support or if we give this care on time, it is very big. It is a very big perspective that patient will be healthy. But if we don't give it on time, if we will bring some documents from one country to next country, from one floor to next floor, it means that patient will have a bad perspective. And the same situation now in Ukraine. We need very extremely fast support because we extremely fast need to be prepared to new challenges. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the perspective from the ground. You talked about the need for speed, but the other issue is, of course, the volume and the financing. And I'm glad to turn to our next speaker, Olha Zykova, Deputy Finance Minister of Ukraine, with a simple question: where does the money come for all of this? What do you assess are the financial needs? How do you evaluate also the international cooperation with your partners, with different financial institutions, but of course the European Union and its member states? We are the major financial backer of Ukraine. And also, how do you go forward with the kind of needs that Ukraine will need for fully rebuilding once the war stops? And how does the perspective of EU membership affect those considerations?
Thank you so much. And I guess the set of the questions require a bit more time than the time frame for the panel, and to let also all the distinguished panelists also to step in with the intervention and with the discussion. I will try to be brief but very precise here. If we speak about the budget system of the country in the state of war, it appears to be still very simple. First and foremost, the focus is around defense and security sector. And for everyone to understand how we actually manage to do that, we put all the internal resources towards giving a helping hand to our military campaign. This is 60% of the budget. This is 27.2% of the GDP of such a big country as Ukraine. So you understand the magnitude and the scale of the funds that are needed in addition to this for other important things. We proceed paying salaries to medical workers, to teachers, to pensioners. We are an aging population. We are a big population, but we still need to provide critical important social payments to the elderly, social protection payments. This gives yet another additional north of 40 billion a year within the budget where we need external financing to come. And since the start of the war, we have already attracted north of 170 billion US dollars. From the perspective of the pure analysis standpoint, the number is huge. But from the perspective of the real effect and what is critically needed, this is the minimum. Because here there is also the third basket, which is the reconstruction. The reconstruction which requires not only simply rebuilding, but actually making sure that this country has the impetus and the foundation to develop. Reconstruction means the resilience put under the reform, the discipline put into the action of recovery, and our EU alignment here plays a critical role in terms of not putting this into the third basket, but actually to put it in the front line of the necessity to keep not only talking about this, but actually to understand where we can get the proper financing for this purpose. Because again, the numbers that I mentioned, this is it. This is the budget of the country in the state of war. And this does not include, by the way, all the emergency appearing, first and foremost on the battlefield, when our army requires, or the Ministry of Defense is announcing yet another package needed for strengthening the army, but also with respect to be a trusted partner, we are keen on reforms. So from the financial standpoint where we are, we have concluded the agreement with the International Monetary Fund to have the new EFF arrangement for the 4 years ahead of us, which gives quite a good anchor for the reforms and anchor for the partners' comfort zone, I would say, so that the financing that is needed to have the program fully funded is there, but at the same time, it's not a trivial exercise to attract the financing which is required beyond the budget. And this is where we need DFIs and IFIs, but also the private sector to step in a more proactive way so that we do not miss a chance to have again the development pillar there. Recently, the World Bank issued the report on the assessment of the damages, RDNA 5. North of 500 billion ticket is unbearable for even the whole combination of all the funding available. And here in Luxembourg, you can all understand, and the markets will reflect it, that it's not simply possible to cover that, if not the reparations. So this is also a very important line that we are working on, so that Russia pays for what it does. But at the same time, we have no time. As Mr. Fedorov said rightly, we are speaking about the speed not because we want to push the partners towards, let's say, going out of the comfort zone. You are all already with us out of the comfort zone. We forgot about that already. We are speaking about the magnitude of the time squeezed. We are in the frame when we literally have the time as the luxury. Because if we do not start repairing what was damaged immediately now, while thinking of midterm and long-term planning towards smarter rebuilding, we will not survive in this mode. And we don't want to remain in the survival mode. We want to have the assistance available so that this survival mode is transformed into the developed and modern economy under the EU partnership. And EU alignment is not simply, you know, the topic for the discussion of big panels only. This is literally what we are stepping into the very clear path of our intention to become the EU member. And I would say that the work condition under which we walk this path actually helped us foster many things. Anti-corruption institutions basement is not easy exercise. Fostering and improving the corporate governance in state-owned banks and state-owned enterprises, yet another task to complete. Judicial reform. So there are things that have been deeply historically enrooted as quite difficult aspects to work on. But since Russia invaded Ukraine, actually we took the moment to reflect very actively, and I would say this is how our institutional immune response actually worked out. Because as any organism, we identified the threat quickly. We had the resources accumulated rapidly towards the response, and we remember the shock, like every organism with the threat, right? Same as in biology. And we remember the shock now very well, so that any other build-up of the threat actually gives us a very clear, stronger response towards the threat. So it's not, you know, self-incorporated. This reaction, this resilience reaction is reflected in the reforms we do, in our action strategic plans with the partners we do. Now there is a very clear coordination between the IFIs, for instance. In comparison with 2022, we have the very clear basis for comparison. By far more coordinated, more disciplined, I would say, to extent possible with very clear bureaucratic mandates, more flexible. But yes, we as the partner, not as pure consumer, would like in the future to contribute. But for this, we also need the contribution from the partners towards more flexibility in terms of the speed of the reaction towards the amounts that we see that are to be covered or the initial gaps. And yes, we have to, unfortunately, in parallel, do quick response in hand with long-term transformation planning. But I think this is the beauty of the story, that if done well, it will be a very good benchmark for many, even European countries to follow. I will stop here so that we'll follow up the discussion, but happy to have other questions to answer.
Thank you so much. I mean, when we were talking about the need for speed, I think a lot of us are kind of also realizing the April deadline for the loan that the EU is about and hopefully will provide to Ukraine rather soon. We now move on to our next panelist, Guyett, who is the first Vice President of the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, which of course has been present in Ukraine for a very long time and has not departed since the full-scale invasion started, quite the opposite. From your perspective and your previous experience, how do you see the role of IFIs and institutions such as yours in supporting the Ukraine's full recovery, but also the kind of the emergency needs that both previous speakers were talking about? And where do you see the role for private sector and also for cooperation complementarities between your institution and EIB?
Well, thank you. And first, let me just say that our focus at EBRD, I think, like Karl said, for the EIB, and parenthetically, as Minister said, I think the cooperation is outstanding. And in this case, 1 + 1 equals more than 2 for sure in how we're delivering. But our focus remains on supporting the people of Ukraine and the emergency needs through the war of aggression. Last year we deployed 3 billion euros, and we will continue to be consistent around supporting these emergency needs as the war of aggression continues. And again, I'm pleased at the close cooperation and coordination we have with the EIB, particularly, of course, some of the other IFIs, to make sure that we deliver consistently for the country and the people. But if you think about the beginning of the planning for reconstruction, which is not just about waiting until hostilities cease. I mean, it's got to start now, and we have to start working on some of the mobilization of private sector investment now. And I'd focus on three themes that maybe we'll develop a little bit more in the panel. The first theme, and you know, I was in Kyiv a couple of weeks ago, and I was very pleased to hear from some of the people on this panel, as well as others, the commitment to reform governance in the country, because that's the first sort of sine qua non for private sector investment in the long run. And I think some of the work that we're doing in the IFIs, bringing best practices, bringing in examples, some of our policy work with the government and the great receptivity of the government and focus on this will create the conditions for investment beginning now. We're already seeing that, but obviously into reconstruction. And here I would make a difference between sectors, for example. If you think about the energy sector, we already have a very, very substantial pipeline of private sector investment into energy. And it's not just about clean energy, of course, it's about distributed energy generation, it's about resilience and security. And so today we probably have at least 1 gigawatt of projects in our pipeline for private sector investment into the country. And then you look at other sectors like water and transport, where we're working together to try to create the conditions for PPPs, for example, which I think will support a lot of the investment into reconstruction. So this governance reform and creating the conditions for private investment is the first thing I'd focus on. The second one, and here I think in particularly because we're the two European-based multilaterals, the EIB and the EBRD have a very, very big responsibility to help the country of Ukraine coordinate investment platforms, projects preparation facilities. How do we help prioritize the projects that ought to get the first focus from our public sector peers, but also the private sector, importantly. And so we're beginning to try to think about how we scale some of the very good work that's already been done during the last 4 years around project preparation and project prioritization. And then the third thing I would focus on is, I think, a role, and again, the European-based multilaterals, we should be taking the lead in this regard, using our capital and our balance sheets to catalyze, to figure out how we can take more risk, how we can be more, to use a word, aggressive in our position in the capital structure so we can crowd in more private investment. And whether you believe the number ultimately for reconstruction is 500, 800 billion or $1 trillion, it doesn't really matter. What's very clear in all of that is there isn't enough funds in the sovereigns and in the multilateral system to do that. We need to create the conditions by using our balance sheets in a way that provides a little bit of de-risking and credit enhancement for the private sector investors. And then alongside of that, doing our policy work and the minister said this, you know, it's fighting a war, it's investing in defense, and it's beginning all the other things. And I think we can use some of our human capital to support the government in the planning and the development of the plans to build the reconstruction programs and bring in the private sector through, you know, our catalytic capital.
Thank you so much. That was very useful, and I think we can go back to the discussion of what the private sector would need to increase that investment, not just in terms of reforms, but of course also the underlying security. We will now turn to Gert Jan Koopman. Sorry, I'll go back to you very soon. Could you maybe, I mean, from your experience, you've been in Brussels steering much of operations of European Commission when it comes to Ukraine ever since the full-scale invasion started. Very huge role when it comes to support for Ukraine's reforms, on its path to EU membership. How do you see, because that's of course the other story of the past 4 years, it's Ukraine's defense, but also it's the reform path that Kyiv has embarked on in 2013 and has paradoxically intensified since 2022. How do you see that interplay between what's happening now and the reforms? And where do you see EU's role in supporting both the reforms on its path to Ukraine's EU membership, but also the reconstruction, which of course, if we are talking from EU's position, this is an investment and reconstruction into a future EU member.
Yes, thank you very much, and I can piggyback on some of the very pertinent points made by my colleagues on the panel. I think actually we're looking at a triangle, right? I mean, the biggest driver, as my Ukrainian colleagues can testify, for the reforms in Ukraine is its EU perspective, because all of the reforms are aligned with membership. And as you know from the experience of a country like Poland, this is transformational. Poland's GDP increased threefold in just 20 years on the back of the reforms and the integration in the single market. And that's, of course, what we hope for Ukraine. Just one number. Ukraine's GDP is, roughly speaking, $200 billion. The size of the internal market, on the other hand, is $20 trillion. So if Ukraine integrates the internal market, for anyone who invests in Ukraine, the potential to sell into is increased by a factor of 100, right? So that tells you in a very simple number how important the EU perspective is. And the reforms are fundamental. They're very structured because essentially Ukraine is replacing the software running the country with the EU's rulebook. We're helping them to do that. So that's the first dimension. It's absolutely critical. It's linked also, let me just as a little aside in this first point, underline the importance of the rule of law and what we call the fundamentals. It's inherently important. We listened to a very telling speech about dignity, and I think democracy, rule of law, fundamentals are essential in this regard, first and foremost. But they're also critical for private sector investment, because they protect property rights, they give visibility on returns. So the EU's reforms, which are anchored on the fundamentals, are also the key driver for private sector investment. That's the first point. Second point, money is needed. We're looking at a war waged by a fascist mafia state against a democracy. That is what it is. Let me call it what it is. And that is leading to unparalleled destruction. Now, as Greg was saying, whatever the numbers are for reconstruction, they will have to come to a large extent from the private sector. But at the same time, the private sector will require significant public support. So the EU, its member states and the institutions have put 180 billion euros on the table over the past 4 years. And I agree very much with what Olga was saying. It's a huge amount of money, but it's just enough. So that's the paradox. Just another figure, I'm a numbers guy. So the IMF program to which you referred, Olga, is $8 billion over 4 years. Just these 2 years, the EU is making available 19 billion euros for military and budget support on top of the numbers that I've already mentioned. So there's a lot of public money, and I just want to say, even if it's barely enough, it's huge. The EU budget every year stands at 180 billion euros. So the Europeans are finding it hard. Everyone who's been involved with these decisions, and I think Karl has been privileged to have a lot of exposure, knows that these are not easy decisions, but they're still being taken. And I think the EU has jumped over its shadow. So sustained financial support is needed. The EU has also said for after the end of the war, we are putting another 100 billion euros through a new Ukraine facility on the table. And the third element, of course, is peace and deterrence, which is an area where the EU has played a more limited role. Ukraine is a front runner, is leading innovation in this space, and the big challenge here is how we link these two elements, the EU system and the Ukrainian system, by integrating the defense industrial systems And I think the war that is now going on in the Middle East shows in a very graphic manner how important it is to have a part of our system in Europe that is capable of withstanding modern onslaught generated by drones. So that's the third element, and we need to continue to invest in it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I will not let you go without asking one more question, because you of course lead the Director General for Neighbourhood and Enlargement negotiations. And thank you for sharing the numbers. I think this is the numbers crowd, and it helps us understand just the scale of what's needed. Could you maybe comment a bit on how the negotiations on Ukraine's EU membership are going now? Because it's such a fundamental thing, not just for people who see Ukraine as part of the EU, but also for the framework for any potential investment, as you were saying.
Yes, so the negotiations have actually moved forward dramatically rapidly, despite the war and despite the fact that we have, unfortunately, one member state that finds it hard to formalize it, to put the formal stamp on it. But the reality is that effectively this month, we will have materially, I underline the word materially, not formally, but materially, come to a point where we have opened, sorry to use this technical jargon, have opened all of the negotiation clusters. So that, is something that we, in other candidate countries, normally took a few years for. This was done super rapidly. And the timelines that are being looked at with the Ukrainian government for actually undertaking the reforms and then closing the negotiations, those timelines are also very ambitious. I have to add, they stand or fall with Ukraine's ability to continue to reform. And what we see is that the country, maybe Alona can comment on it, in the past few months is finding it more difficult to reform. But the negotiations, even if Hungary has not signed off on them, materially have advanced extremely rapidly, as if all the formal paperwork had been completed.
Thank you so much. And that's why I wanted to kind of go to Alona Shkrum now. You're the first Deputy Minister for Development of Communities and Territories of Ukraine. But of course, you're of the generations of Ukrainians who stood on the streets of Kyiv in 2013, then joined the parliament ranks, forming the group of Euro-optimists, if I remember correctly. So how optimistic are you about Ukraine's European future? But also, if you could go back to talking about, how the communities were affected by the war, by the destruction, how the municipal infrastructure, transit links, energy have been affected. How do you assess the scale of the damage, and where do you see the priorities for international partners to assist?
Thank you so much, Jana. It's great to be here. It's my first time in Luxembourg and in EIB headquarters and forum, so it's an inspiring opportunity, especially after all the words that were said. I see no point of not being an optimist at this situation. I think it was Churchill who said something like that at the Second World War: when the things are very bad, you can only be an optimist because it will only get better. I think we are quite at the crossroads of the world, big world changes, right? Not just with the Middle East, but with the logistics corridor, with the European future, with the world security. I think everybody starts to realize that Ukrainians realized more than 4 years ago. However, the good news are that I think that with the lessons of Ukraine using credit money, using EIB money, using EBRD money, developing projects throughout the war under bombs, under constant shellings, with blackouts. The fact that Ivan Fedorov is here today talking about how to reconstruct and rebuild the region that is constantly shelled every night and every day, and he knows how to do that, and he has already the lessons of how to do it efficiently and fast. I think it shows that a lot of lessons could be drawn from our expertise and our experience. And this is quite the point why we are here, right? I will give you the numbers because I think we are in the heart of a banking system of Europe, in the room with a lot of bankers. So I think the numbers are important in comparison to what has been done, what are the lessons, what are the needs, and how should we move forward for this year. So as Olha has said, the rapid damage and assessment needs, which was done this year for the 5th time already, RDNA 5 showed 588 billion of needs for reconstruction. What does it mean? It is 33 times more than the RDNA done in the Western Balkans after ex-Yugoslavia war. It is 10 times more than the RDNA done in Gaza sector. So it sounds, a lot. Ukraine is a big country, and Russia has been shelling, damaging, and destroying everything constantly, especially for the past year. But what does it mean in comparison to other numbers? If you compare, as Gert Jan, you already said, the number about 20 trillion of EU internal market, right? It doesn't seem as bad or as horrifying. Also, we have 3 billion of Russian frozen assets. Difficult to get, but in comparison to 588, you can see an understanding. It is unfortunately 64 billion more than last year. So the damages and the needs for reconstruction increased by 64 billion in 1 year, 2025, and most damages occurred in 3 areas. Energy, and I think we all understood that, but the numbers, they do not lie, they are very precise. Logistics and transport, and this is what changed for the first time in war. Russia has increasingly targeted logistics. Only Ukrainian Railway was targeted 1,200 times, and each target is 17 drones, 100 drones, combined attack of drones and missiles. So we have seen those damages increase, and housing. So again, 3 sectors are energy, and all to do with energy, right? Utilities, water supply, logistics, and housing. And so this comes to our priorities for this year, because we have to go through those priorities. So the first priority would be a resilience plan, reconstructing energy, preparing for the next winter season, and reconstructing water supply, modernizing water supply, all of the utilities. We as a ministry are responsible for providing people with water and heat, and we cannot do that if their energy system doesn't work. So we coordinated very closely and very much with the Ministry of Energy, with the Ministry of Finance, with the whole government approach of the resilient plan for the most difficult regions for the next winter. And we are already preparing for next winter, because even if the war is over magically tomorrow, Kyiv will be incredibly difficult to get through the next winter, just because Kyiv does not have generation of electricity, right? And because the central energo stations and the central heating plants have been so much damaged and destroyed. So we are doing that, and that would be priority number 1. Second priority is transport and logistics. As I said, railway has been hugely damaged, but if you compare, for example, and go to the numbers again, Russia has damaged or destroyed 4,000 kilometers of roads in Ukraine, only in 2025. What does it mean? It is twice the amount of road, needed to go from Luxembourg to Kyiv and back. So twice the amount of road from Luxembourg to Kyiv. Or, for example, the amount of kilometers you need to go from Luxembourg to Iran. It's a lot, right? However, we have a number of financial mechanisms, and we have a number of projects that are already in action, and roads are very possible for PPPs, for concession of the roads, for other private investment capital, because what those numbers shows, there is no possibility we can do it only with public money, with European Commission guarantees, with EIP or EBRD. We need to go into the private investments, and that's what we are doing. And even now, we made a political decision to start a number of PPP and investment projects. For example, the biggest terminal in the port of Chernomorsk is right now up for a concession. We have a very transparent process that we do together with a number of huge banks and partners, and I think we need the successful cases even right now in difficult situation and difficult times to show that investments are possible, that investments are there, that there is a huge interest and there is a huge possibility for this PPP. And this is also the part of the plan. And then the portfolio of just our ministry with the European Investment Bank is $2.7 billion, which again is a lot. We do need more capacity for the regions and for us on how to use it. We do need more speed. I think Ivan talked about this word speed. This is a key word for this year. We need speedy procedures. We need better procedures. We need better quality of projects. We need better preparation of these projects. We here count heavily on the PPFs that we have created, Prepare and Ukraine First and others, and we encourage other countries to do their smaller PPFs for their businesses or for their interest in private bankable projects. We also talk about frontline regions, because all of what I described is very much concentrated on the 10 borderline of frontline regions. So the regions that are on the border of Russia, Belarus, and the Black Sea, they have more than 75% of all of the destructions. And they have the people. So which means, as Ivan has said, the Zaporizhzhia region has more than 1 million people, more than people here in Luxembourg, right? And people are not moving away. They don't want to be evacuated. They just want to have a possibility to have a hospital, to have an underground school or another school, to have heating, to have water, and to be able to stay there. And for us, it's strategically important that we reconstruct those borderline regions and that people stay there, that people open up their businesses, that people rent apartments, that people pay taxes, that the economy continues. And this is what I think we've showed in our resilience for those years of war, that it's still possible and that's still doable. So the main, as I said, priority would be energy, utilities, heating, and water, and that I would put as one word. Second would be transport or logistics, which we need to reconstruct. We need to have much more bankable projects in this area, but also much more focus from the banks and from the European Commission on possibilities in this sector. And also housing, we have not talked about that much, but we have a number of programs. And I'm quite proud to say that we have counted on a dashboard the amount of projects in reconstruction that only our ministry, together with the other agencies that we coordinate, did. And we have more than 2,700 projects of reconstruction done in 2025 and planned in 2026. And more than 1,300 multi-store buildings reconstructed in 2025, and it will be much more. Which means that if you count the school, water pipeline, kindergarten, hospital, a shelter, multi-store building, energy efficiency in multi-store buildings, we have more than 2,700 projects in 2025 and 2026. And I think this is quite impressive during the war, during the blackouts. So, I mean, we are ready to move forward faster. We are ready to move forward with better quality of projects. We do require help for us and for the regions, especially the borderline regions, to prepare those projects, to disburse the money, to get ready with the projects for the programs that we have with EIB and with other banks. We would like European Commission sometimes also to move faster. We do respect all the internal procedures and all the speed that you already have, but this is something that we still require and will need. And we are getting ready for the big reconstruction. Once the war is over, the big reconstruction will mean that we would have to get much faster with better projects, with better understanding, with better teams preparation. And here, as I said, we rely on PPFs. We also rely on something that we talked about on the project management unit or super project management unit that could be created, helping different EIB projects and different EBRD projects to move faster and to work more professionally in each sector, such as water, transport, housing, roads, etc. So I think this is some of the plan that we are discussing together and some of the priorities that are clearly visible. So yes, I am an optimist, and I think that Ukrainians have showed that even through those times, it's possible to not just plan or dream or be resilient, but it's possible to rebuild, it's possible to modernize, it's possible to go into investments, and this is how it is for us. We don't wait for 0 hour when the reconstruction can start. I think we've proven that all together, and we are super grateful for EIB, for the banks, for European Commission, for DG Enest, that they have not been waiting for 0 hour for the reconstruction to start, and we are doing it now. Thank you.
Thank you, Alna. Could you maybe comment a bit more on, you've outlined the reconstruction priorities. Could you maybe talk a bit, I know you don't speak for all of government, but where do you see the key reform priorities for this year?
That's a very good question. I mean, it did not change from the past year as well. We wish sometimes that the parliament would be more capable of those reforms right now. And the reforms did not change. We look at the rule of law. we look on the more transparency and anti-corruption, and we do what we can in each ministry. So for example, for us, I will still come back to reconstruction, even in the reforms process, it's super important to do those PPP projects in a very transparent way. And the concession of Chernomorsk, for example, we do together with EBRD and IFC and other international partners as a pilot projects, big pilot projects in reconstruction, rebuilding, investment. We do need to require it to be as transparent as possible, as open as possible, as European-oriented as possible. The Parliament has passed last summer the law on PPP, which was very, very heavily endorsed by the European Commission, which goes already into the best practices of the European Union. So the legal basis is there. For now, for us, the implementation part should be there as well. And I think that this perception of transparency, of anti-corruption, of the rule of law, it has a lot to do with the private capital money that are gonna be in Ukraine, right? Sometimes the perception is not the reality, right? So being member of parliament, I know how much money and how much informational attacks Russia did to actually damage the perception of transparency of those projects. And Russia still continues to do that. So we need to move faster, and we need to show incredible successful cases and results of reconstruction, of transparency, of the rule of law, of treatment of the foreign investments. And I think this is what we are doing.
Thank you so much. Let's now move on to Taras Pazashko, who is the Chief Financial Officer of Naftogaz. Naftogaz has gone through quite a leadership change last year. Could you maybe comment a bit on what do you see, what's the situation in Naftogaz, but broader in Ukraine's energy sector right now? Where do you see the most urgent needs? And how do you see the role of international partners in full reconstruction of Ukraine's energy sector?
Yes, thank you. So first of all, I would like to thank EIB for real practical support for Naftogaz in 2025 and 2026. Really, this 300 million euro and additional 50 millions of euro were valuable for us, and it helps us to go through the heating season. So some information about the Naftogaz. We are 100,000 employees. We have more than 60 entities and 8 business units. Our main focus is natural gas and also oil, crude oil. In addition, we have gas distribution networks, gas storage, and also several heating plants through the country. And attacks on our assets and our business were numerous, and there were hundreds of attacks through the last year and at the beginning of this year. And in 2025, there were 2 huge waves of attacks on Naftogaz. The first one was in February and March, and it influenced greatly. We lost more than 45% of our production capacity. And then we have recovered. By the end of September, we have recovered all our production facilities and reached the recordly high level of production. That is the record from, that is the best result from 2008. So we have successfully recovered, but at the beginning of October, there was a new wave, a new attack which has destroyed numerous production facilities and also infrastructure, which had influenced 60% of our capacity to produce natural gas. In this case, we had 2 campaigns to raise funding. First, it was after the first wave of attack, and we had raised more than 1 billion euro to procure natural gas to sustain our natural gas system throughout the heating season. And the next fundraising campaign was already after the second wave of attack. And we also raised more than €1 billion to cover the needs in natural gas procurement. So we had to import 5.7 billion cubic meters of natural gas through 2025. And we have secured 1.9 billion cubic meters of natural gas in first quarter of 2026. For now, we have more or less secured everything regarding the natural gas. We have just several facilities which are finalizing now, and it would be our reserve for any new attack and any new critical need which can arise. Really, we have attacks on our different facilities, not just natural gas, oil production. Our heating plant in Kherson is attacked almost every day. So the front line is less than 10 kilometers. So Russians have an opportunity to attack every day. That's why we're trying to sustain and to recover everything and to provide our services to the people. Throughout the heating season, in some cases, natural gas and the supply of Naftogaz was the only source of energy for the civilians, while you have your natural gas at the kitchen as the only source of the heat for your apartment. So finally, we have managed this heating season in the aspect of natural gas, and I'm sure that without this support of EIB, EBRD, Ukrainian banks, and of course donor supply and the Norwegian government, who provided a huge amount of support to Naftogaz, we could not manage it. Yet, what is ahead? All these damages and attacks influence greatly our capacity and capability to produce natural gas for the system. Our main goal, in general, for Naftogaz is to build up energy independence in the aspect of natural gas. Now Ukraine is just covering from 80 to 85% of internal consumption. So we need to not just to have the recovery, but we have to develop. And that is our main task, not just to pay attention to the recovery, to the surviving mode, as Olga has said, but also to the development and to the transformation of our business and transformation of our company and energy system overall, because the decentralization practices are also the way to improve and to build up business efficiency and, of course, resilience. So finally, what are our needs for now? We are now working in two directions. First one is the recovery, and we are trying to recover all our damaged and destroyed facilities. We need a huge amount of funds. So it's the total budget is more than €900 million. And we have agreed on more than 200 million for donor support on the equipment needed. We are covering more than 450 million by our own funds for the construction, for the installation costs, and so on and so on, and of course the security. but our need is 250 million euro for the new equipment. And the very specific thing here is that it's not only for the replacement. That is sometimes, and in most of the cases, more efficient equipment that will improve our capacity, that will improve the level of carbon emission, that will be more efficient, and that is especially build back better. So we would focus on it, and we hope we will find the solution, quick solution for our critical needs. Because the critical needs here, that is the equipment supply. Equipment supply has more than sometimes a year of delivery time. So if we prepay today, we would not receive this equipment by the beginning of the next heating season. That's why that is a critical need. We have to make the prepayment and to be ready to pay all the amount immediately. That's why we're working on it and trying to find the best solution to cover these needs.
Thank you so much. We have roughly half an hour for discussions or questions from the audience. So if any of you have a question, please raise your hand, try to catch my attention and introduce yourself. I see the first hand in the second row, please.
Thank you very much for inspiring so much food for thought. And like Alona, I choose to be an optimist as well. So I'm Kristina Mikulova, the head of office in Kyiv. Nice to see you all together on this panel. So as an optimist, what would you answer to a donor, international finance institution, to an investor, if you were asked, what's Ukraine's economy of the future? What should we invest in? What is the comparative advantage? What are the strengths? What are we bringing to the table? As one of you said, apologies, I can't quote that exact person back to them. We like to say that Ukraine needs the European Union. Likewise, Europe needs Ukraine. So what is that value added?
Thank you. Anyone wants to take the question right now?
I want to answer, of course. Dear Christina, I have answer for you. Let's speak about invest potential of the Zaporizhzhia region. Before 24th of February 2022, every 4th kilowatt of energy in Ukraine was producing in the Zaporizhzhia region. It means that we have high quality and high priority energy for steel production in our region. Also, we have many unique factories like titanium factory in the Zaporizhzhia region. It means that, in my opinion, if we look forward to my region, of course, we need investors and we need to producing titanium for Boeing Airbuses in Zaporizhzhia. And it's like a priority for us. We understand that now Zaporizhzhia nuclear power station occupied by Russian troops. I know that we will liberate it, and I understand that we will have big quantities of cheap energy. And it means that producing factory of those factories who will need very big numbers of energy, we can build around Zaporizhzhia nuclear power station. And why very important for me personally, European and international investments? Because with money we can take security, and it is very important for us. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I would just add and to tell you what we're hearing from multinationals and Ukrainian companies. There are two other sectors that I think will be pretty obvious. The first one is agriculture, and the impact that Ukraine will have as part of the EU in terms of high quality agricultural land, but also the opportunity to build an agricultural supply chain and downstream operations in Ukraine. And then the second one very much is around technology and the innovation economy, the redeploying of intellectual capital that's been developed in the defense tech sector into dual use and other commercial applications is a big area of focus that we hear about from international investors.
Thank you, Taras. And then we'll move to other questions. Thank you.
One short message. Naftogaz and Ukraine has huge resources of natural gas and oil. The resources are higher than 2 trillion cubic meters of natural gas. So we can supply, if we produce this gas, we can supply not just to Ukraine, but also to Europe. And investments are needed first to cover our internal consumption and then to be able to supply to the surrounding countries. So really huge potential, at least in this area.
Thank you. I profoundly apologize. I missed your hand. Aliona.
Thanks so much, Christina. You do not pose easy questions, but I will try to be brief. As I said, I think we need to openly say and accept that the world is entering a new era of turbulence, of things being done differently, and we need to prepare for those things. And there are not a lot of countries in the world that have an expertise in that have capacity to do it, that have resilience, people, technologies, and strengths to do it under pressure and to do it in a very changing and turbulent world, under shellings, under drones. What Ivan has not told you that he's building right now more than 10 underground schools. How many, Ivan? More than 20 underground schools for children. And they are absolutely exceptional and incredible. I don't want this to be the economy of the world of the future, but the fact that we are able to do that, I think, shows a lot. And we talk about people, we talk about technologies, and we talk about the expertise that we have right now. When we talk about people, it's about the resilience, the capacity, the fast moving. When we talk about technologies, we are obviously talking about drones and physical protection that we are doing together with Agency for Reconstruction, nets that we are doing on all of the major roads of Ukraine, just thousands and thousands and thousands of kilometers and tons of nets that stop the drones. And if you have seen a picture of that, it's quite impressive. The world did not believe us when we tried those technologies, and now other countries come and learn from our experience. We have modular shelters that the agency and the ministry are building right now in Borodyanka and in other cities, which is 10 times cheaper than the regular bomb shelter, can be assembled in 2 weeks, and looks like something from the future, but the future is there now. And we have new infrastructure, big infrastructure projects that still go into this infrastructure diplomacy of Ukraine possibly being, the country that connects Asia and Europe and other corridors, big corridors, not just the TNT, but other big corridors and gateway of the world. So I think this expertise cannot be undervalued. And I think that we've shown that we can do it under pressure, we can do it with innovation, we can do it with the people. And this expertise, unfortunately, will be very much needed and is very much needed. And we are ready to share that. We have already such countries as Finland, Denmark, Norway, the Baltic states who are coming and learning this experience. But the world is changing. And we are quite ready to share the experience of how to work under pressure, under shellings, under bombs in the changing world, with not enough money and not enough resources, but for sure enough resilience and enough positivity in that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for highlighting that this is really not a one-way street. This is an exchange that's beneficial for all. I mean, you are paying a huge price for learning how to do that under certain conditions. Olga, do you want to add to this question?
Yes,
Okay.
I think it's important to say that it should be the establishment of market-led recovery first, and then to foster the private sector to actually scale up and innovate, so that to allow for high-quality employment. Because here we should keep in focus our people, and we have a highly talented people who actually will be the task force for every reconstruction efforts, post-war development. And here, with all the labor shortages that we are witnessing, we are having a very critical need for this economic dynamism to get people back home and for them to be comfortable in terms of having all the zone for high quality employment.
Thank you so much. We have roughly 20 minutes, and I've seen a couple of hands from the audience, so we'll take all the questions now, and then we'll come back to the panel who can answer your questions. You can pick and choose, and also add your closing remarks.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for a brilliant conversation. Francesca Grandi, I direct the global program at Transparency International on defense and security. Ms. Shkrum, thank you very much for mentioning anti-corruption and integrity. I think is an essential part of such an important conversation. I would just like to ask you to elaborate a little bit more on that in terms of what is the plan. It's very clear that there is political intent. It's very clear that there is public and social support for integrity and anti-corruption measures, and that's very positive and very encouraging. And I cannot stress enough how impressive the resilience and the efforts that have been made so far have been. Since I am in the business of supporting this kind of efforts, I would like to know more about what people like us can do to support. And so more specifically, as investment is coming in, as money will start inevitably to flow in more significantly, especially in the defense sector, a sector in which I believe you have a lot of expertise and a lot of experience to share and export. I would like to know more about how we can support and how we can work together to make the safeguards and to make the governance framework stronger and more resilient for the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We now move on to other questions.
Okay, thank you. Can I start? My name is Lelena Marcinkevich. I represent the civil society network Bankwatch. So my question was, I wanted to raise the question about the sustainability, but I think it was already covered, so I'll go to the next one. I think the red line of the discussion was the timeliness of everything, that it is crucial. So I would like to ask, so what are actually the bottlenecks from the donor side? Maybe the Minister of the Finance can mention, or other donors. So what is actually the bottlenecks so that the initiatives are not timely? From our experience, for example, I can bring the Just Transition Fund, which was announced last summer, and it is still not operational. So what are the issues here? Why is it still not included in the public investments? And another matter, I'm the civil society representative here, and I would like to bring the issue that everything that donors are doing is crucial to be transparent, and we are open to be involved in any processes about it. For now, it was already mentioned that the Ukraine plan as a part of the Ukraine facility has to be changed or amended, and we still do not see the processes or consultations open. So if you have any information about that, please.
Thank you. Could you please pass the microphone to the gentleman in front of you in the first row? Thank you.
Two quick questions. One concerns private sector involvement. There's a general agreement that public money will not be enough, that we need private investment. And at the same time, everyone agrees that waiting for day zero doesn't quite cut it. We need to act now. But I represent Polish Development Bank. Together with EBRD, we're probably involved in at least one industrial project, which is private sector, that has already been bombed after being constructed. So what's the, first of all, do you see many of such private sector involvements from abroad? And if not, what's still needed to unlock it? Because even PPP projects, be it a port or a road, is tricky because there's a number of risks to challenge. And the second question concerns resilience. Ukraine is fantastic in reacting under pressure and improvising to make life bearable and actually work reasonably well in super difficult circumstances. But what is something that you really, really miss and wish to have had before the war as a lesson to all the others? I mean, what's really something that we should start building, reconstructing, rerouting, and doing before the crisis hits?
Thank you so much. And we have one more question here in the second row.
My name is Tom Plummer. I'm one of the founders of a deep tech drone company, and I'm happy to hear that you mentioned drones earlier. I want to emphasize and will ask a question and offer a suggestion, because I now work for 10 years in the space. I will try to get it done in 2 minutes. Okay, that's a little sporty, but I will try to offer this suggestion because I think it can help. So I worked for 10 years in the drone space now, focused on medical logistics with drones, built a cargo drone company, 150 people funded, thank you for EIB, with 40 million by EIB, total 120 million. And we built this with the full idea to do good with drones in the world, civil. Then we were asked, can we team up with Ukrainian partners, which is Tough Industries, the current largest drone manufacturer. They build 80,000 drones a month. Super impressive, very strong team. I really like to see, I mean, my partners are so amazing. It's so motivating to see this survival mode, but also really going all the way, building this company from scratch over the last 3 years. Knowing that I talk to bankers now, or people in the space with expertise, they made in 3 years from zero, without investment, without any venture debt or anything, now to 1 billion revenue. So these guys know what they do, but still they get bombed. Their facilities get attacked the minute. I was in Kiev just on the anniversary not long ago, and I couldn't even take pictures of the facility because I visit the factory, but even if you picture just the color of the windows, a missile might hit very soon after. So, but I learned how they produce things, low cost, masses. We don't do this. In Germany, we built a factory that produces high-end products, fully certified for civil airspace, everything. It took 10 years to basically just build the drone, and now we start selling it, while they, in 3 years, built now 80,000 drones capacity a month. What I want to say here is, and this is for the people with the banking background, there's a massive business while we can really, truly collaborate and help Ukraine and Europe at the same time build true resilience, because there's Build with Ukraine, a new program. I was on the stage at Munich Security Conference, signing with President Zelensky behind me. Luckily, he supported, together with our Minister of Defense, Pistorius. We signed an agreement with Tough Industries that we now manufacture the drones in a safe place in Germany. Reactivating automotive, we will just put 150 people back to work in the next 2-3 months to mass produce the same drones they have now battle proven. They actually work. It's not any PR, it's not drones like super expensive and not actually helping the soldiers. It's true drones. We start with reconnaissance drones. We will mass produce interceptor drones. We're talking about 20, 30, 40, maybe 50,000 just for the beginning, and that's just the beginning. And this capacity will help Europe, because if things get bad, and it might get bad, because a forced peace might mean that there's 2 million well-equipped, super well-trained soldiers, an aggressor that needs war for economy. And that means it can, while I wish for Ukraine that this stops, I saw it in Kiev, what it means with all the little flags, showing that all the dead soldiers, people that die for fighting for freedom. So I want this to stop, but it must stop in a way that it will not continue in the Baltics and so on. So we need this strength, because unfortunately the aggressor understands only strength. Now I know it's 2 minutes, but I tried to summarize. Build with Ukraine is an initiative that has been set up, that Ukrainian companies team up and create joint ventures, like with drone companies like us. We now will mass produce Tough drones in Germany, which will give new jobs to the people that just lost the jobs due to the declining automotive industry. So we create new jobs. We create a new industrial base for Europe, means that we have this power to mass produce interceptor and all kinds of drones.
Would you like to ask a question?
The question is, I love the fact Rebuild Ukraine, and I have been here all the forums. I love EIB Forum. I have been for the last last year's year, and there was already this topic 2 years ago, rebuild Ukraine. But the first and major step before this is how to win this war. That's the question. And the answer is total air superiority is one of the major pieces. I spoke to General Puschnik, I spoke to different German generals, Mr. Freuding, and so on. Really great generals. And they said simply, you need for months a wall. And I'm not talking about the drone wall to sell some more drones. I'm talking about serious intercepting all drones that come, stopping any vehicle that comes. And our drones can scan entire surface. And this is not a sales pitch, okay? Please don't get me wrong. Yes, we need funding to build this. I'm still raising funds all the time. I'm still a startup founder trying to pitch here also that drones are a big business because my partners just made $1 billion now every year annual revenue by setting up a company from scratch with zero funding.
Thank you.
So the question is how to win the war. The answer is, and I want to discuss this with all of you afterwards.
I think we can give the answers to
can
the
we
panel.
team up? Can we team up and build this capacity? Because it will be in the next chapter, resilience for Europe. But in the first case, it should win the war in Ukraine because air superiority is one big piece of the puzzle to win this war. And it's possible. It's possible to win this war and show the aggressor that it's not okay what they are doing because it's really horrible.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Maybe we'll go from this side now. Maybe you all take your questions and pick, but I think that the last one about how to win the war is also partly for the audience and the speakers we have here about how can we help scale up Ukraine's defenses, Ukraine's ability to be resilient and stay resilient. So you can pick and choose. I will just summarize. There is a question about corruption and how can we involve the civil society in monitoring some of the spending, which by design, part of that is non-public. Could you talk about the bottlenecks on the donor side, where you see that donors can do things differently? Though I would say, as a former government official, I've seen a lot of bureaucratic creativity in its best possible form that has helped Ukraine throughout the 4 years. How to attract more private sector investment? We've seen the problems that the companies are facing, even those who are investing in Ukraine. What to do now? What are the priorities? And last but not least, and maybe that's a question to Ivan Fedorov, but others, please comment on well. What are the lessons learned? What would your advice be for the Europeans to do better now? So if crisis hits, they're better prepared. Besides taking lessons from Ukraine, of course. Taras, the floor is yours.
I'd like to address to the question regarding the donor support and the overall support to Ukraine and especially to Naftogaz. The first thing is, of course, to facilitate all the processes. Really, we had managed with numerous challenges which were ahead, and for example, the case regarding our fundraising for natural gas and sustainability during this heating season. But the key question and the key issue is that we should, together with the donors, together with financial institutions, find out the instruments and the way to facilitate all the processes, because timing here is extremely topical.
Thank you so much. Gert Jan, maybe could you comment on the reforms? And also, EU has been one of the key supporters of anti-corruption reforms and civil society in Ukraine.
Absolutely. No, absolutely crucial for all the reasons we have already discussed. Very concretely, there will be a revision of the Ukraine plan to channel some of this additional money from the 90 billion to Ukraine, and it will focus very heavily on anti-corruption fundamental reforms. And obviously there will be consultation on it. I hope to be able to start this very, very soon indeed. And then secondly, in the summer, we will be reporting already on the implementation of the commitments that Ukraine has taken as part of the EU accession process. As I said, we've been very fast. All of it is there, but now it needs to be implemented. And it is understandable that after 4 years of war, it's challenging. The Rada is finding it difficult to advance. But this summer, our member states are going to be looking at delivery, not just plans, not just intentions, but delivery. And so is the private sector. So I'm calling on everyone here to take that extremely seriously. It's all about credibility of the delivery of the reforms. Early summer will be an important moment to collectively look at how far Ukraine has got. Thank you.
Thanks. Time is indeed of essence in so many ways. Aliona Schrom.
I cannot comment for the whole government, but I can comment on what could be done and where we need help in transparency mechanisms and from the civil society in our area of expertise, which is development of regions, communities, infrastructure, recovery, housing, reconstruction, etc., etc. Basically, when we were mandated by the president and by the prime minister to do the physical protection of energy facilities, it was middle of October last year. We were faced with a dilemma that there were a number of questions about the previous protection mechanisms, about the previous numbers, about the cost of protection, etc., not done by us, but in general done by Ukrainian entities. And all of those objects, all of those protection mechanisms are top secret. So you cannot do a dashboard where you will show what kind of protection with what kind of concrete you did in what kind of energy facility and what kind of transformator have you covered. Otherwise, it makes no sense. Otherwise, Putin, he does satellite images every day of those objects, but he would just have a perfect dashboard to damage everything that we have reconstructed. But there needed to be a way to show the civil society, the population of Ukrainian, average Ukrainians, people in the army, that we are, that we are not, that we are transparent, that we're doing all that we can. So we had a number of sessions, and we really need here maybe more expertise and more help from Transparency International, from civil society, of what can we do more. But right now, every week, Agency for Reconstruction does a dashboard of monitoring of prices of all the physical protections that they do. Every week you can go to the agency website and you can see an average price without physical location, but an average price in every region of concrete, of metal construction, of nets, of armature or something like that. And you can see whether it was above the market average or below the market average, and what regions did what. Because each region has a very difficult set of prices. If it is in Zaporizhzhia, it's much more probably difficult to do the protection than in somewhere in the western part of Ukraine. So you can monitor the prices without identifying physical locations and physical secret materials, etc., but you still can have a picture and you can have an information to understand. And the same could be done in other areas. So here we would like innovative ideas from the civil society, and we would like some kind of help from donors on how can we make it more transparent, but not more risky in terms of security and defense for our people and the people who are doing the reconstruction. If we reconstruct a bridge in the city of Kiev or in the area of Kiev region, it will be very difficult for me to show all that we did publicly and even to show a picture of the bridge when we finish the reconstruction. Because I know that that would be targeted by Russia. Sometimes it's not because what I showed on my Facebook, but because they want to make a perception that it's Ukrainian officials to blame for the damages or for the shellings, right? Sometimes they see it without us by satellite. But it's become very difficult to be transparent in a way what materials we are using, where we are doing the reconstruction, how we are doing it, but we try to do our best in this way. And it's even more difficult for the Ministry of Defense, I can imagine, but they are doing this way as well. So any kind of assessment and help here would be great. And just one more word about the reforms that we have not talked here about. It's more to do with the Ministry of Finance, but it's also a lot of homework for us. It's public investment management reform, right? So when the needs are overwhelming, you have to prioritize. And each year we try to prioritize. We do the single project pipeline of the priority projects that has to be done and has to be financed and why those are priority projects. And we are forcing right now, the regions, the governors, the communities to do their own single project pipelines. And this exercise has been very useful because Ukrainians are great in resilience, but not so great in strategy planning under the bombs and shellings and without, water and heat. But we are forcing them to do that, and we are forcing ourselves to do that because for the big reconstruction, we would need to prioritize even more. But now we need more mechanisms, more guarantees, more insurance and more money coming into those SPP projects. Otherwise, mayors have done the SPPs, the single project pipeline, but they get no money for those projects, and obviously they don't understand why did they do that. But this reform is also one of the core ones in the government.
Thanks. I take it as an invitation for the civil society to further help with transparency. With the risk of being very unfair to the three speakers that we still have, I will just ask you to be very brief with respect to the other panels, but we don't want to leave without hearing you.
Well, let me just quickly, on the private sector, that's what I'll cover. I would say first, it's very, very inspirational how ambitious Ukrainian companies, private companies are in investing. And the speaker referred to, I think, I don't know if it's the same one, but I visited a facility that had been destroyed partially by a Russian missile. The company was already rebuilding it and developing their next set of investment plans. So I think Ukrainian companies have adjusted, have adapted, and are investing. We're starting to see now conditions, the minister referenced the port PPP that we're working on, where I think we'll start to see international investment in logistics first, and then eventually we'll see, but only when the security conditions are appropriate, multinationals make real long-term capital investments. But I will say the Ukrainian companies, private companies, are investing a significant amount today with support, but they're investing a significant amount.
Olga?
Given the scrutiny on time, a few words from me with regards to, in general, on the question whether there are obstacles and what are they and how we see the movement towards more flexibility. I would say that I have the basis for comparison. I've been for a while in the ministry, and since the start of the war, there has been a huge shift from classic bureaucracy towards more flexible and creative systems incorporating, starting from the establishment of the new tools, which allowed very efficient channeling of and anchoring of the partner countries' funding, but also towards more blended finance, EU guarantees as the new narrative for us. I would explain why, because from the standpoint of the fiscal sustainability and macroeconomic stability, we no longer operate under the necessity of providing sovereign guarantees. So it is a huge shift towards the IFIs taking more risks on their shoulders and recalibrating within their own classic mandates towards more flexibility. Of course, on the very ground, with regards to the procurement rules, with regards to the tenders, with regards to the EU standards that are to be aligned with our legislation and vice versa, of course, a huge work is still to be done. But at the same time, we do understand how much effort has already been put by each of the DFI and IFI towards having more alignment with the reality that we face. And when we speak about the speed, we are not, putting it as a judgment. We simply reflect what is on top of our priority from the standpoint and how we would like to see the whole system rolling up and the way it should roll up together with the EU colleagues in terms of the integration itself.
Thank you so much. And last but not least, Ivan.
Yes, thank you. I understand how much time costs. That's why I very closely. First of all, you answer how to activate private business. On my opinion, give insurance. In Ukraine, we need military insurance, and it is one of the most important things. Second, what lessons learned you need? I'm sorry for my example, I'm sorry. But on my opinion, from my experience, I think 100 FPV drones, which cost 200,000 of euros, very easy, can make blackout in Luxembourg for several hours. That means that yesterday when I went from airport, I looked to your transformator stations and I'm sorry.
Thank you. I have failed as a moderator to enforce
And
time,
last.
but I think the speakers have provided a lot of food for thought on how to continue supporting Ukraine and learn from Ukraine that we don't have to be sorry if something happens. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that wonderful panel. To move it on